The demon who looked like a person. Imagine finding a burning body on the side of a deserted road. Now imagine discovering that the body had been so brutally mutilated that the victim had had her fingers, toes, nose, and ears deliberately removed. This is the true story of how a predator used a fake identity to lure a young nurse to the most gruesome death. If you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now so you don't miss any cases like this. It was an ordinary evening in Stonington, Connecticut. The small rural town, known for its rolling hills and winding roads that become especially gloomy after dark, was about to become the scene of a macabre discovery. A driver was driving down a secluded road when he spotted what appeared to be a brush fire. Concerned, he pulled over and called the fire department. While he was searching for a fire extinguisher, a local fire chief arrived on the scene with his own equipment. The firefighter began to fight the flames, but quickly realized that this was no ordinary fire. Amidst the flames, a human form could be seen. At that moment, the scene ceased to be a simple fire and became a crime scene. With extreme care, the firefighter aimed the extinguisher upward, allowing the chemicals to gently fall on the body, extinguishing the fire without destroying any potential evidence. Connecticut State Police immediately cordoned off the area, closing the road for investigation. The body was charred beyond recognition. It had been wrapped in multiple layers of plastic, blankets, sheets, and duct tape, as if the killer had carefully prepared the package. The way it was wrapped made it clear that this was not the crime scene, but rather a disposal site. The responsibility for identifying the victim fell to Dr. Ira Kaner, a forensic pathologist with 3 decades of experience and more than 4,000 autopsies under his belt. For him, dealing with gruesome scenes was part of the job, but this case presented unique challenges. When the body arrived at the morgue, still wrapped in plastic, the team had to carefully remove each layer to preserve evidence. What they discovered was shocking. It was a young woman, probably in her 20s, with light skin, possibly black or Latina. But the most disturbing part was yet to come. The victim had been systematically mutilated. She was missing her nose, ears, and all of her fingers and toes. There was also an area on her lower back where the skin had been surgically removed. Dr. Kaner's first impression was clear. Someone had deliberately tried to obscure the victim's identity. No fingerprints, no toes that could have rings or tattoos, no distinguishing facial features. Identification was made extremely difficult. The examination revealed that the front of the body had been burned much more severely than the back, indicating that the victim had been lying on her back when she was set on fire. The area of the back that was in contact with the ground remained relatively undamaged, and it was here that Dr. Kaner made a crucial discovery. The skin removed from the back had not been burned off. It had been carefully cut away. The doctor immediately suspected that there was a tattoo in that spot, probably large and distinctive enough to make identification easy. Connecticut detectives began searching state databases for missing young women with large back tattoos. Initially, they came up empty. But when they expanded their search to neighboring states, they found a promising match. About 80 miles away on Long Island, New York, Rebecca Koster, a 24-year-old nursing assistant, was reported missing. The report had been filed by her father, Larry Ross, after Rebecca's employer called to report that she had not shown up for work. The police report contained photos of Rebecca, descriptions of her height, weight, hair color, and crucially, mentioned a large butterfly tattoo on her lower back. Despite the striking similarities, Connecticut detectives remained skeptical due to the distance involved. It was then that Dr. Koester made a discovery that would change everything. The killer had made a strategic mistake. He had left the victim's teeth intact. Dental records are a foolproof form of identification as long as the teeth have not been removed. Rebecca's family provided her dental records, which were personally brought to her by Long Island police. Dr. Koester's office compared the records to the victim's teeth, and the match was perfect, as reliable as fingerprints. Rebecca Koester of Long Island was definitely the woman found burning on the side of the road in Connecticut. Now the hardest task remained, informing the family. Rebecca's mother, Barbara, vividly remembers the moment she received the news. Detectives were waiting for her at home, and she knew immediately it was bad news.
When they confirmed that they had found Rebecca and that it was a homicide, Barbara ran out of the house, screaming that someone had killed her baby. Rebecca was a vibrant, happy young woman who was very close to her mother. She worked as a nursing assistant, caring for adults with developmental disabilities, and she loved her job. Like many 24-year-olds, she enjoyed going out and having fun with her friends. On the night she disappeared, Rebecca was planning to go out with her best friend Nicole and her boyfriend Dan. Before she left, she was playing with her brother, trying to steal his fries. She told her mother that she would go to their favorite hangout, hang out there for a while, and then head home to sleep and work the next morning. Barbara was working night shifts, and at around 3:30 a.m., she received a call from Rebecca confirming that she had arrived home safely. This was the last communication between mother and daughter. When Rebecca didn't show up for work, Barbara knew immediately that something was wrong. It was uncharacteristic of Rebecca to not communicate or respond to her mother's calls. Concerned, Barbara contacted Nicole, who said she had left early, leaving Rebecca with Dan and other friends. Rebecca's boyfriend, Dan, naturally became the prime suspect. It was a new relationship, nothing serious, but anyone who was last with a murder victim automatically arouses suspicion. When questioned, Dan said he had dropped Rebecca off at home at 3:30 in the morning, walking her to the front door to make sure she got in safely. He swore he loved Rebecca and would never hurt her. Detectives suggested that Dan take a polygraph test to clear his name. Surprisingly, the results indicated that he was lying. However, investigators were not entirely convinced of his involvement. Dan cooperated fully with the investigation, allowed them to search his home from top to bottom, and there was no sign that Rebecca was ever there. Furthermore, when detectives confronted other people who had been in the group that night, their stories all matched up perfectly. With no solid evidence against Dan, investigators needed to widen the field of suspects. They turned to Dr. Koester to determine the time of death. The doctor explained that Rebecca had been seen drinking at the bar, and that normal people metabolize about 1 drink per hour. However, toxicology tests revealed that there was no alcohol in her system at the time of death. Since metabolism stops after death, this meant that she had remained alive for a significant period after leaving the bar. Dr. Koester estimated that death occurred about 4 hours after Rebecca was last seen, but cautioned that determining the exact time of death is an inexact science. The family managed to access Rebecca's phone records and discovered something crucial: 2 calls received early in the morning, both from the same number, 617. The calls were at 4:10 and 4:27 in the morning. Investigators suspected that whoever spoke to Rebecca at 4:27 in the morning was likely the last person to see her alive and possibly her killer. Police quickly obtained cell phone records for the number. By triangulating cell towers, they were able to track the caller's movements. The data showed that the caller was moving from west to east in the direction of Rebecca's home. The first call, at 4:10, lasted approximately 15 minutes. The second, at 27 past 4, lasted only 20 seconds. Based on the location of the towers and the length of the last call, investigators believed the caller was at Rebecca's house, likely letting them know they had arrived. When they tried calling the number, they got no answer. There was no record of the number 617 in any system. It was a disposable phone, untraceable. Meanwhile, Dr. Kaner struggled to determine the exact cause of Rebecca's death. One way to tell if a person was alive during a fire is to look for soot in their lungs. If there is soot, it means the person was breathing during the fire. Rebecca's lungs were free of soot, confirming that she was already dead when she was set on fire. The doctor then looked for other injuries that could have caused her death. Due to the burns, external injuries were difficult to identify. Dr. Kaner examined all the vital organs and found a stab wound to the liver, accompanied by several hundred cubic centimeters of fluid and clotted blood in the abdominal cavity. But he wasn't sure if the stab wound to the liver had been fatal. Rebecca also had 4 stab wounds to her neck, but because of the burns, it was difficult to determine whether they were pre- or post-mortem. The doctor explained that there are veins and arteries in the neck, and if a person is alive when these veins are cut, it is possible for air to be sucked into the vein.
There was a visible level of air blood in the heart, indicating that at least one of the neck wounds had occurred while Rebecca was alive, and the air had been sucked into the venous system, going directly to the heart. Because of the multiple sources of injuries, Dr. Kariner listed the official cause of death as the result of all of them. It was definitely a homicide. Someone had deliberately stabbed Rebecca multiple times in the neck and liver. With the cause of death determined, police began tracking Rebecca's movements again. Through interviews, they discovered that the group had gone to the Butcher Boy bar, which had a surveillance system. The footage showed Rebecca sitting alone while her boyfriend and friends chatted with others. A man could be seen approaching her, a little older than the typical 23-year-old, dressed conservatively in a sweater vest and appearing harmless. He quickly approached Rebecca, and there was some communication between them for a while. More interestingly, the footage showed both of them using their phones together. It appeared they were exchanging information. The man picked up Rebecca's phone and dialed a number. Based on what they saw, investigators re-interviewed the people who were with Rebecca that night. One woman named Jennifer remembered something new. Jennifer described the unknown man at the bar, saying he made her feel very uncomfortable. He was pushy and asked strange questions. He even took her phone and entered his name and number, hoping she would call. Cybercrime detectives extracted information from Jennifer's phone and discovered that someone named Jay Brown had entered the number 617 into her contact list. Finally, they had a prime suspect for Rebecca's murder. The number 617 that appeared in Rebecca's phone records was the same one that Jay Brown had entered into Jennifer's phone. But before they could track down Jay Brown, they received an urgent message from the Connecticut Crime Lab. The fingerprint examiner had managed to process the duct tape that had wrapped around Rebecca's body and developed 2 fingerprints, her left and right thumbprints on the sticky side of the tape. Getting fingerprints on the adhesive side of the tape, especially after a fire, was extremely rare. The prints were uploaded to the state database and within hours were identified as belonging to Evans Genthier. Now investigators had 2 prime suspects, Jay Brown, who had no criminal record, and Evans Genthier, who did. Genthier's record wasn't particularly serious, but it included domestic incidents with his girlfriend and allegations that he used her for prostitution, as well as a fondness for photographing women in his garage. Investigators asked Jennifer to return to the police station. Knowing that Evans Genthier's fingerprints were on the tape involving Rebecca, they put together a photo presentation. Jennifer positively identified Genthier as the person who took her phone, identified himself as Jay, and entered his number. The revelation was clear. J. Brown was not a real person. He was a pseudonym used by Evans Genthier. Investigators focused all their resources on finding Genthier. They knew he owned an SUV and that his girlfriend lived in the Bronx. After conducting surveillance, they located the vehicle parked near the girlfriend's residence. The next day, Genthier was observed entering the vehicle and arrested. He was taken to police headquarters where he was questioned by 2 detectives. Surprisingly, Genthier consented to the search of his vehicle and residence. In her garage, they found a paint roller, cleaning brush, broom, cement cleaner, paint, and a paint tray. There was an area that had been visibly cleaned and painted over, which seemed suspicious, but nothing that directly linked Rebecca to that location. However, when the vehicle was processed at the crime lab, they discovered questionable red stains all over the car. There was a blood stain on the driver's side console, dripping down. Between the seat and the console, where a person sitting in the seat could easily cut themselves, there was blood pooling on the floor. DNA tests determined that the blood belonged to Rebecca Koester. They could now prove that Rebecca had been in Genthier's vehicle and that something violent had happened there. Faced with this damning evidence, Genthier did not confess. Instead, he launched into an elaborate defense story, saying, "I'll tell you, but you won't believe what happened." Genthier claimed to have met Rebecca at the bar, where they simply chatted. He decided to call her because he wanted to continue the party. She gave him directions to his house. During the drive to his house, she began foaming at the mouth as if she were having a medical emergency. When they got to his house, he opened the garage, and Rebecca was so unsteady that she needed help walking, needing his arm to keep her upright. He took her into the garage to try to give her a glass of water. According to his story, while they were walking down the driveway, Rebecca tripped over a set of dumbbells, hit her head on the cement, and began bleeding profusely. He put her in the back of his SUV and drove to Mather Hospital, but on the way, he noticed that she had stopped breathing. When he brought her back home, she was dead, and he panicked. He tried to hide her identity to make her look like a missing person. He admitted to cutting off her fingers and toes and carving the tattoo on her back. He said he then wrapped the body in the back of his SUV and drove to the Port Jefferson ferry. Once in Connecticut, he kept driving until he ended up near Stonington. He didn't know what to do with the body. He bought gas, drove around, and then panicked again. He just wanted to get the body out of the car, so he stopped in the area where it was found, dumped it on the side of the road, poured gas on it, and set it on fire. But when you look at the sheer brutality and horrific acts he committed, it becomes clear he wasn't covering up an accident. He was trying to cover up a murder. Experienced detectives knew Genthier was lying, but knowing and getting a suspect to admit to lying are 2 different things. The most effective way to confront him was with the medical truth. Investigators needed Dr. Coroner to refute Genthier's story. Otherwise, he could be convicted of a much lesser charge, desecration of a corpse, rather than murder. They needed to prove that Rebecca was alive when the incident occurred. Dr. Coroner was adamant. Rebecca was definitely alive when she was stabbed in the liver, as evidenced by the hemorrhage in her liver and the fluid and clotted blood in her abdominal cavity. She was also alive during at least one of the stab wounds to her neck, as evidenced by the gas embolism. Genthier claimed she tripped, hit her head, and killed her, but when the doctor examined her head, there was no evidence of a skull fracture, subdural hemorrhage, or any trauma. The autopsy showed she died from the stab wounds to the neck and liver, not from the fanciful story of a fall. Armed with the coroner's irrefutable findings, detectives charged Genthier with second-degree murder. Even during the trial, he maintained his innocence, claiming that he was a victim of the entire situation. One of the most important points for the jury: was the physical evidence that disproved his story. If Ganthier's version were true, Rebecca would never have bled in the front seat of the car. He claimed to have placed her only in the back of the SUV, never in the front passenger seat. How else could the blood have gotten there if it not through an act of violence? The trial lasted for 4 grueling weeks. Rebecca's mother attended every day, and her pain was palpable. She wanted to make sure she was there for Rebecca and got her justice. After just 5.5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Evans Ganthier guilty. They believed the cause and manner of death to be murder by stabbing beyond a reasonable doubt. The judge sentenced Ganthier to the maximum of 25 years to life in prison and condemned his incredibly cruel behavior after Rebecca's death. Rebecca's mother, Barbara, said finding Ganthier guilty brought more relief than happiness. Relief in knowing he wouldn't be out on the streets hurting anyone else. But it didn't bring Rebecca back. She admitted she wished she could be the kind of person who forgave, but she couldn't, at least not in this case. As Dr. Cariner said, in this case, if they hadn't found out what happened to Rebecca or found out who she was, she would have been buried in a mass grave and no one would have known anything. They really did speak for the dead. The coroner and the police department got justice. Our channel is having trouble monetizing its videos due to the true crime content. So if you like our work and want to help us keep producing, consider making a donation. It's quick, secure, and makes all the difference. Just click on the button with the heart symbol that says "Thank you very much" right below the video, or access the link in the description. Any amount helps us a lot to keep the channel active and continue bringing these stories to you. Thank you very much for your support.